Welcome to House Judiciary, everybody. In case you can't tell, there's not been much improvement in my voice since last week. So I will try to talk as little as possible and leave it to the people that will be presenting today. Before we get started on everything, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Breen.
Present.
Representatives Edwards.
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Hope. Here. Arbit. Devendorf.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Sterniglu.
Here.
Fink.
Here.
Wenzel.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Outman.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Madam Chair, you have 12 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. I have a motion from Representative Edwards to approve the minutes of February 14th. Thank you. Those are now approved. Today we will be voting on House Bills 5384, 5385, and 5386. We'll be taking testimony on House Bills 5328 and 5429. We are going to begin with taking testimony on House Bill 5429 from Representative Morse. And do you have somebody to testify with you? I do. Patty Sabin, President and CEO of Michigan CASA, which is not the Spanish word for house, but court-appointed special advocates. Thank you. Please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify this morning on House Bill 5429, which would codify what we currently have basically through the appropriations and on the judicial side. It's court-appointed special advocates. And Patty here is going to go in a lot more detail about what the CASAs, as we call them, do. But I just want to say that it is really a critical piece to our child abuse and neglect system. As you may or may not know, when a child is engaged in our child abuse and neglect system, there are many parties typically involved. And CASAs fill a very important role, which is to make sure that the special interests of the child are always ensured. Of course, their guardian ad litem also does that, but the CASAs can really play the role and make sure all the parties have all the information they need and the child is well taken care of in the course of these proceedings. So it is also falls under the budget that I manage on the House side, Health and Human Services. They have received for a number of years $1 million just for their infrastructure that they need. These are volunteers that actually go in as CASAs to help the children. But Patty's going to go into more detail about the day-to-day and why it's such a necessary piece to protect our kids.
Thank you. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Or do I need to get closer? Good morning, Chair Breen and members of the House Judiciary Committee. Thank you for taking up House Bill 5429 for testimony today, and thank you, Representative Morse, for sponsoring this legislation. My name is Patty Sabin, and I'm the President and CEO of Michigan Court Appointed Special Advocate, which is CASA for short. I was sworn in as a CASA volunteer 22 years ago. I served 5 families with 13 children and have supported numerous other children in some capacity over the years. I was an advocate supervisor and then an executive director for CASA of Kent County before accepting the role of president and CEO of Michigan CASA in 2015. And I tell you all this because there's one thing I know for sure, that the children of Michigan who are wards of the court because of abuse and neglect are mired in a challenged system through no fault of their own, and one that does not allow for individual advocacy to occur. Michigan CASA provides just that, unbiased individual advocacy in its very purest form, with the only agenda being the child's. CASA is uniquely designed to provide this best interest advocacy. We're the only child advocacy group in the state of Michigan. Michigan's guiding principle is that children should remain with their family of origin whenever that can be safely achieved. The CASA movement began in 1974 in Seattle, Washington, when a Judge David Sukup determined he needed more information about the children he was making these life-altering decisions for. Michigan CASA's first program opened here in the state in 1984. Actually, it was Kalamazoo County. Today, Michigan CASA is comprised of 25 programs serving 30 counties with 768 volunteers serving over 1,400 children. I believe you were sent or given the flyer when you were first seated, and that will show that. Our ultimate goal is to serve every county here in the state of Michigan. Michigan CASA is part of a national network of 939 state and local programs in 49 states and the District of Columbia. Who are these court-appointed special advocates? They are caring, committed community volunteers who are carefully screened and extensively trained. They are sworn in by our courts and our officers of the court. Our judges appoint CASAs to typically their most critical cases. They value their independent voice. The CASAs, through their investigation and building relationships with parties to the case and through their quarterly hearing reports to the judge, help them make the most well-informed decisions. Our judges value their independent voices. Our judges state they read the CASA reports first to get a true sense of what is going on. CASAs stay with the case until each case is closed. This is one of the many benefits of having a CASA assigned to the case, is they are committed to the case until that child is in a safe and permanent home. A typical case will have several foster care workers, foster care placements, peer groups, teachers, but only one CASA volunteer. They visit their assigned child once every 7 to 10 days. Foster care caseworkers are required to visit their children once every 30 days, and the child's attorney once every 90 days. And for those of us who are parents in here, we know that a lot can happen to a child in that amount of time, both emotionally, educationally, even medically sometimes. Visits could be anything from coloring with the child in the foster home, to throwing a Frisbee in the backyard, to running down to McDonald's for a chocolate shake. One of the questions we always ask the child is, what are your wishes? What do you want me, your CASA volunteer, to tell the judge? We had one little girl say, tell the judge I'm cute. And when she was asked, are you sure? She replied, yes, tell him I'm cute. So the volunteer did. CASA will always convey this information in the report, many times along with a photo of the children, and it makes the children more real to the judges. The training curriculum, which is 30 hours plus 4 hours courtroom observation, has been developed by the National CASA and is mandated as such. And that means a child in Kent County will get the same quality advocacy as a child in Wayne County or Oakland County. We also require 12 hours of continuing education a year. I would also like to share about our volunteers and a couple of the stories that they've made happen. We had a volunteer that tracked down a high school credits for his CASA youth who was just starting his senior year. The young man had been placed in 14 different high schools during his career. Because the volunteer was able to recover these credits, the youth could graduate on time with his peer group. We also have volunteers that make sure sibling visits happen. This is so important for our kids. We have volunteers who will attend an IEP meeting with the school with the parent. So making sure that this parent understands the whole process. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the IEP process, but it can be daunting for most of us. We also, well, this is the best story, and I actually shared this with Representative Morse a couple of weeks ago. We had a 7-year-old boy who had been placed in 3 foster homes in 6 months. His volunteer went to visit him at his newest foster home. The foster mom went in to get him from his bedroom and told him that his CASA volunteer was there to see him. He came out of the bedroom, looked at his CASA volunteer, his face lit up, and he said, "You found me." So that's what CASA is. This CASA legislation is so very important to the organization and to the children of the state of Michigan. It will legitimize the mission and work of the program and volunteers. It will also codify the foundational elements that are inherent to all CASA programs. That would be volunteer screening, training, supervision, and it will give the courts the ability to assign CASA volunteers without question from parties to the case. That would be local child welfare providers or the bar. So thank you for your time, and thank you for taking up House Bill 5429, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have two questions.
Yes.
Well, first is going to be for Rep. Morse, is more to do with the fiscal aspect, and the second will be for you as far as a bit more about these volunteers. So, Rep. Morse, thank you so much for bringing this. I knew right when you talked to me about it, this is something that we absolutely needed to take up. You are in the position of making sure that there's funding allocated here. Now, you said there's been $1 million allocated historically. Is that a figure that you expect to stay the same, or that you think more money will be needed? What's the fiscal overview here?
Well, I think when you consider the fact that we're only in 30 counties right now, obviously at some point the CASA volunteers would love the opportunity to expand to those other 53 counties that surely those kids need that protection as well. So it currently has been an ongoing, but we also, of course, we always have to consider the budget is dependent upon who leadership is, right? So leadership has to value it. Part of codifying it is to put the emphasis on the fact, like, this is a needed service that the state of Michigan has been providing. And, it would always be the opportunity to expand it. And that would be the hope, of course, depending on budgetary conditions and what CASA has capacity to do. But Patty, if you want to go in more detail.
Well, one thing, our local programs are individually run and operated. Individual programs won't go away, so the legislation will still be necessary because services will still be rendered in each of the counties that are served today. What will be important will be for growth, will be this continued state funding, and that's for expansion into unserved counties. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and but I have a follow-up with you, and then we have some other questions from the committee.
Good.
If we've learned anything as we've been going through juvenile justice, the more intervention that we have at an earlier age and to help these kids along, one, that saves us a lot of money in the long run, but also this gives kids a better outlook on life to know that somebody cares and is there for them. Can you tell us about the volunteer organizations? Because from what I understand, these are strictly volunteers.
Correct.
Tell us maybe a few examples of the different organizations that you work with, maybe how they interact with the guardian ad litem's or with the courts. But I definitely want to know more about these individual organizations and volunteers.
Okay, the volunteers are recruited many different ways. Once they're recruited, carefully screened, go through extensive background checks. They go through the 30 hours of training, and we use that as a screening tool, and we encourage them to use that as a screening tool because this role is not for the faint of heart. It's a tough volunteer position. I can remember one of our volunteers that I had supervised. She came into my office and said, "I can't believe I don't get paid for this." And they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And then, I'm sorry, the second part to your question, the interaction with the system. Obviously, the courts. Our judges value the feedback they receive from our volunteers just because they understand that they're the frontline people and they're in the homes on a very regular basis, getting to know the children, developing that relationship with them. As for the foster care caseworkers, we make it clear that we are not the caseworker. We augment, we support what the worker does. I'm sure you all know these workers are, in my opinion, overworked and underpaid. We talk about that all the time. There's huge amount of turnover. And so you get a volunteer that's assigned to this case, and they can support their efforts. Don't get me wrong. We will still have our own opinion, based on our investigation, our own recommendations. Again, it's fact-based investigation. So we like to collaborate with that worker. All the other individuals, the child's attorney, we support their efforts. We kind of make sure that they're seeing the children on a regular basis, which is really important. And then we do go to court every 90 days. We will be asked to testify at some point. That is all gone through in training. Like I said, it's a huge volunteer role.
Thank you. I did a stint as a student attorney with the Juvenile Abuse and Neglect Division, and I find it absolutely astounding the amount of themselves that people can give to help these kids. So thank you for what you do. IEP meetings are tough and long, so what your work is very valued. Representative Fink.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent 3 counties, but I only have one small town in Lenawee County, Hudson. The other 2 counties are Branch and Hillsdale, which both have CASA programs. I've spoken with folks at both of them. I think the first time I was introduced to the CASA program at all was before I was in office by Judge Bianchi in Hillsdale.
Yes.
And so I have a pretty good familiarity and a lot of admiration for the work that the CASAs, at least the ones in my district that I'm aware of, are doing. And so I guess I have 2 questions. One, there's 30 counties. As I look at the map of them, they're mostly contiguous. Interestingly to me, Lenawee, Jackson, Washtenaw, and Calhoun don't have them. Those are counties with greater resources than, say, Branch and Hillsdale. So I'm interested if you have any perspective as to kind of why the counties that have them versus the ones that don't. And then as a follow-up, I guess my question would be, how much of this bill is imposing new regulations and potentially, I guess, making it more of a challenge to get a CASA started? I mean, that would be kind of my concern. Is are we fixing something that isn't broken as we try to expand it?
Great questions, both of them. The counties that are not covered, that's an individual county decision or a court decision. It's not necessarily a Michigan CASA mandate. So Lenawee, we've actually already started conversations with them. But Washtenaw is a county that, again, it's an individual decision. Now, as for the bill or the legislation itself, no, there's nothing new added to it. This is what we've done for, since 1985, serve our children. So there's nothing new in the legislation that would change any part of our operation.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm making notes here.
Okay.
There could be retribution.
Thank you for your testimony, Patty. Do you have any personal knowledge of what's going on in Macomb County, where that's my home base?
Oh, it is, yes. Well, we have started conversations. We had a feasibility study conducted back in July, and I just need to talk to the right people. So it's very nice to meet you.
Hey, let me know if I can be of assistance. Second quick question. Are you considered a mandatory reporter?
We are not, no.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Hope.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. It's nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So I thought I recognized you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of personal connections to the abuse and neglect world, and so I know how important it can be for a child to have someone that they can count on to go through the process with. So my comment, first of all, is that this work seems too important to go unpaid.
Yes.
Given that you have managed to succeed over the last 30 years or so, how long does your volunteer typically stay with you? Do you ask them for some kind of time commitment? And then what kind of support do they receive? You mentioned it's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
Do they receive any kind of counseling or emotional support?
Yes. Our volunteers, we make it clear during the screening process that if you start a case, you must finish a case, because that's one of the benefits of the mission is that we're going to stay with that child until permanency has been achieved. This child has so many strangers coming in and out of his life. So we make that very clear. We tell them that cases typically last 6 to 18 months. Our longest case was in Kent County, and that was 8 years. And one volunteer stuck with those children for 8 years. But that is not typical at all. So as for supervision, they absolutely, like I said, during the training process, screening both sides, they're assigned to a supervisor, and they have this person that they speak with on a regular basis. They're not out there experiencing this journey alone. It's very important for them to have the support, the volunteer to have the support at all levels of the organization. The other thing that's important to note is that we do have some programs that have therapists that will help for secondary trauma, because again, the majority of these people, of our trainees, these wonderful individuals that give of themselves, a lot of it is new for them. When I went through training, I had never been in a courtroom in my life. And so it's really important for them to have the support that they need, because then you're looking at volunteer turnover. So does that answer your questions?
Yeah, thank you for your work and thank you for your.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Edwards, you probably have a unique perspective.
I wouldn't say all that, but thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with my background, but I worked in the area of child welfare for 15 years. And as a foster care worker, that job is much more challenging than what we do here now. But having a CASA worker, it's much more. Having a CASA worker work alongside you is very powerful and is very supportive. It allows you to do your job a little bit more effective. If you could just, for my colleagues, explain briefly some of those extra benefits it is to have a CASA program in the county that it does exist in.
So like how a CASA volunteer would benefit the system? Okay. Oh, I've got lots of. Okay, sure, absolutely. We've had CASA volunteers that will call the teacher, develop a relationship with the teachers, get the grades for the worker so the worker can report in court on how the child's grades are and how the child is doing. We've had volunteers, which we don't encourage this, but sometimes the worker might be a little bit queasy about going out to a particular home. We will have the volunteer, they've offered to ride shotgun so that there's safety in numbers. We've had, typically after every visit with a child, the volunteer will check in with the worker and just, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm seeing. What do you think about a tutor for Jimmie? What do you think? Will this be helpful? Can I make the calls to set this up? Are the parents receiving the parenting classes? So we had one volunteer that actually went out and found, parenting classes were completely booked. It's going to slow down the reunification process. So the volunteer went out and found parenting classes at a neighborhood church, and so the parents could go ahead and attend that. So it's just things like that. Supporting the process, collaborating with the system. Again, we might not always agree on our recommendations, but that's okay. That's what the judge wants to see.
And can I just add that they do all of that and not get paid to do it?
Correct.
I think we should highlight the importance of understanding that this is a volunteer role. They're not getting paid to do the work that they do. And they do so much. Because working with them, you often forget that they're not getting paid, because sometimes my CASA worker would do way more than I'm doing. Like, she's not getting paid to do any of this, but she's still showing up for that child and that family. So thank you for presenting this issue and allowing us to review it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any additional questions. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. I expect we'll be able to vote this out at our next hearing.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to call Representative Jimmie Wilson Jr. up next, but before we get started with you, you can make yourself comfortable. We're going to take some votes. So we are going to take up House Bills 5384 through 5386. This is the package that we heard testimony on last week regarding truth in renting and post-closing. Let's see, do we have some cards to read in? Tabitha Zimney, on behalf of Michigan Mortgage Lenders Association, supporting the bills, not wishing to speak. I will take a motion from Representative Carter to report House Bill 5384 with recommendation. Madam Clerk, please call the votes.
Chair Breen.
Aye.
Representatives Edwards.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Hope.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
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 Fink.
Yes.
Wenzel.
Yes.
Wozniak.
Yes.
Outman.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. And I'll take a motion from Representative Hope to report House Bill 5385 with recommendation. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Breen.
Aye.
Representatives Edwards.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Hope.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Fink.
Yes.
Wenzel.
Yes.
Wozniak.
Yes.
Outman.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. Finally, I will take a motion from Representative Arbit to report House Bill 5386 with recommendation. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Breen.
Aye.
Representatives Edwards.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Hope.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Fink.
Yes.
Wenzel.
Yes.
Wozniak.
Yes.
Outman.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. We are now going to take testimony on House Bill 5328 from Representative Jimmie Wilson Jr. And you are joined by some friends. I believe we have Judges Michelle Rick and Charles Lasada here with you. So, Representative Wilson, please tell us about the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I love how you always stick that junior on the end. I appreciate it. Here to talk about House Bill 5328 today. Very simple bill. As you can see, you probably don't get many bills that are like 2 pages in your committee. And you can even look at the House Fiscal Agency, probably a half a page here. Very simple, but I think it's very important for when we're talking about fairness and also stability for our judges that are doing such an important role in our state. What this bill does is bring, when we're talking about their retirement matching contribution, currently there's a 3% match, and what we want to do is bring it up to a 5% match. So a 2% increase. The reason we chose that is because this is actually on par with other state employees. They are already at a 5% contribution match. In fact, judges, unless they're on the old system or they're on the Court of Appeals, they don't actually receive any kind of health care from the state. It's an option for counties to provide, but some do not. And so this extra 2% is actually going to help them with their health care cost post-retirement. So that is pretty much the gist of the bill, honestly. In essence, this would give judges the total match provided to other state employees. So with me today, I have Judge Rick and Judge Lasata, and they'll go into a little more detail. So I'll turn it over to them if it's your pleasure, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Representative Wilson. Good morning, Chair Breen, Majority Chair Edwards, Minority Chair Fink, and members of the committee. It's great to be with you this morning. I'm Michelle Rick. I currently serve on the Michigan Court of Appeals, representing 56 counties throughout the state. So imagine Lansing North. That's my district. I'm also past president of the Michigan Judges Association and president-elect of the National Association of Women Judges. And today, I'm here in my capacity as former president of MJA, as well as being a current member with Judge Lasada, my dear friend, on the legislative committee. Representative Wilson's House Bill 5328 is wholly supported by the Michigan Judges Association. Our current president, Judge Feeney, also on the Court of Appeals, but she hails originally from Kent County, is sending her letter of support to Representative Breen. We want to thank Representative Wilson for carrying the torch on behalf of all state trial judges and the Court of Appeals judges here in Michigan who have no pensions. Let me repeat, we have no pensions, and we have no health care benefits upon retirement unless specifically carved out. But House Bill 5328 is literally a product of several decades of work of MJA, and that is not overstating things. When I joined MJA as a trial court judge in 2007, then Circuit Court Judge Tom Altus and Davis, who later went to the Court of Appeals and then on to the Supreme Court, this was one of the efforts that he had undertaken. And that was because in 1997, the state retirement systems changed dramatically for state employees as well as judges, in that pensions were eliminated and we went to a defined contribution plan. I also want to thank Representative Breen before I offer just a couple more remarks. I want to thank you and all members of the legislature for working with the MJA last year during my presidency. I am proud that we avoided policy and instead spoke with members of the legislature on issues that affected the judiciary in hopes that we could improve process and make the end result of the work that you have all done workable in the courts, because we do serve a different function. So we look forward to continuing that relationship with the judiciary. Anytime you need help or want input, we are here to be of an assistance to you. By way of background, I mentioned in 1997, the state ended pensions for state employees and judges. I'm intimately familiar with that because at the time I worked in the Attorney General's office, and I happened to serve as legal counsel for the state retirement systems, all 5 of them. And for those judges and state employees who were part of the system prior to that legislation, they were able, if they so elected, to keep their pension. But when you consider that judges have a retirement age of 70, or they can't run for their elected office after the age of 70, now that we fast forward to 2024, there are maybe a handful of judges. The majority of judges in the state are now part of the defined contribution program. Years ago, the legislature recognized and fixed the problem as it related to health care and expenditures on behalf of state employees who are now under the state defined benefit program. And they did that by adding a 2% match toward health care costs. And Representative Wilson's bill would create parity and basically bring judges in alignment with the health care benefits and the match for state employees. In total, this will, if you ultimately approve and the governor signs the legislation, will translate to an additional $1.9 to $2 million in terms of the hit on our state budget. You may be asking, why is this legislation critical? Apart from providing parity with between the systems, there is another reason that this legislation is important. It will enable the judiciary to attract the best and the brightest who serve in public service roles to decide matters that are most intimate and critical to Michigan's electorate. We recognize that Each case that we preside over is important, but it is of utmost importance to the parties that stand in as plaintiffs and/or defendants. As public officials, judges are elected and have to run for office. Those who raise campaign money, as I have done, and I'm sure Judge Lasada has done once or twice in his career. Our judicial canons require that we remit any unused funds either back to the people who gave us that money or to the state bar. In other words, we do not have the ability to utilize those resources once we are elected to office. That differs state to state, as I've heard from my colleagues in the National Association of Women Judges. But we are in Michigan very unique creatures indeed. I wish to thank you for your time and your consideration. And at this time, I'm going to turn things over to MJA's president-elect and my very dear friend, Judge Lasada, and would be open to any questions after he's finished.
Great. Thank you, Judge Rick, Madam Chair, members, Representative Wilson. I'm very pleased I made the 2-hour drive to hear Judge Rick call me her dear friend because she reviews my work. But in any event, it's a pleasure to be here today. I was thinking on the drive over in 2003 and 2004, I was the majority vice chair of this committee. And I've had a number of jobs. I was a civil lawyer, a mayor, a state rep, and now a circuit judge for 20 years. And by far my favorite job was being a state rep, just because of the range of issues you deal with, from a 401k bill today to a capital outlay for a university tomorrow to an Emerald Ash Borer bill the next day. It's a very interesting job. I also remember that back when I was the rep from the 79th District, Representative Wenzel made a school trip to the Capitol and was bit by the legislative bug as she's been serving Southwest Michigan and in the county that I serve in, Berrien County, for a number of years. Just a couple of quick notes, because Judge Rick did an excellent job. Rep. Wilson mentioned healthcare retirement for judges, and some of you may know my wife, Kim Lasada, was a state rep and a senator, and last night she said, no matter what you do, don't whine. Don't talk about what the judges need, this and that, but just some differences. Rep. Wilson mentioned healthcare retirement, and he's exactly right. The county that I'm from, there is no healthcare, and of the 83 counties in Michigan, I'm not going to say something that I do not know is accurate, but I believe the vast majority of counties don't provide health care to judges. Oakland, Wayne, Macomb do. Kent County does as well. The big five there, but most counties do not. In my county, Berrien County, we're starting to have some difficulty in recruiting people. There's the statutory age of senility that Judge Rick mentioned. Once you turn 70, you can't run again for judge. And we had an opening a year and a half ago. We only had one person apply for that job. We currently will have an opening this year in my county because of that statutory age of senility. Only one person has applied. I tried to recruit a couple of people that I thought would be good. One woman in the southern part of my county that has a tremendous practice, and she was, Charlie, why would I do it? It's a pay cut, and there's no pension or health care. I need to, I'm not married, I need to plan for my future, and I couldn't really falter for that conclusion. I think it is a very simple bill, as Rep. Wilson mentioned, simply allowing judges an extra 2% match to help themselves as they get towards retirement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer with the bill sponsor, Rep. Wilson, and Judge Rick, any questions you may have.
Thank you for all for being here. I know when the judges approached me about this bill, I said, it'd be perfect for that. Jimmie Wilson Jr. So, because he is the chair of the Judiciary Appropriations side. So this is a dual impact sort of bill. You've got the policy side, you've got the appropriations side. So, and I read the fiscal impact last night, and we are looking at a chunk of change. So I would leave it in Rep. Wilson's hands to try to shepherd that through, because we can't do the policy part without the money. So,
could I make one more point? I'm sorry, I meant to mention this.
Judge.
So Rep. Wenzel and I are from Southwest Michigan, Berrien County, extreme Southwest Michigan. I was actually licensed in Indiana as an attorney before I was licensed in Michigan. And so I keep an eye on Indiana and Illinois, what they do with their judges. And at least last time I checked, it's different than Michigan. Michigan in 98, again, 97 I guess it was, when the legislation was passed. In Indiana and Illinois, they have pensions and health care and retirement. We don't have that, and I'm not whining about it. Just this 2% increase would allow us to plan better for our retirement. So we'd appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
No, I completely understand, and let's face it, most of us up here and those of you, we could be doing something different and probably making a lot more money, and the people that are here to serve. And so you have to have other incentives in order to keep good civic-minded people there, and this is a good step towards that, I think. So I look forward to working with Rep. Wilson to see what he might be able to accomplish on the appropriation side. We do have a question from Representative Fink.
I have two, but one I think is a simpler technical question. So I was trying to navigate the act, and there's some ins and outs. So I was not able to satisfy myself in reviewing it whether this only applies to trial judges. Is it only circuit and probate judges, or is it circuit, probate, and district judges, or is it everybody, every judge in Michigan?
It's every judge in Michigan who has a defined contribution plan versus a defined benefit plan. We still have a few that are defined benefit that have pensions. It does not apply to them.
So are Court of Appeals judges included?
She's defined contribution as well as I am.
And the Supreme Court as well?
Actually, I believe they are. Yeah. They don't have a pension either.
Right.
If
Okay.
all of them are there post 1998. Anyone elected, I was in the rep class of 1998. I just missed the legislative pension.
Yeah, I
And-
appreciate the timing
yeah,
difference.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, and then thank you. And then my second question, which is a little more substantive, if Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, Kent, and any other larger counties do provide something like retirement health care, that's about half the population of our state. I think it's about 4.5 million people in those 4 counties alone. So if what we're trying to solve is something like a retired judge affording health care and retirement, but something around half of the judges in the state are in one of those counties, what should we do with that? I mean, is this a solution that's a little bit too broad for the challenge that you're trying to confront?
Thanks for that question. I'm going to put on my former assistant AG hat from 1997 and tell you that, even in those instances, Representative Fink, where people may have health care, they still have out-of-pocket costs. I was counsel during the Studier matter, which was a public school employees retirement system case, where there was an argument that because health care was a defined right, that it could not be lessened, and therefore any new treatments or new drugs that might come up in the future, that those would be covered because I have a constitutional entitlement as a public school employee, which I personally do not, but that I have a right for you, for the state to cover that 100%. And the Studier lawsuit, anyway, the end result was that, no, you might be entitled to coverage, but any out-of-pocket costs would be borne by you. So there's a nuance there that I think would exist. So even for our members who come from those counties that you've mentioned, they will still have out-of-pocket costs. So it's not a double dip.
The other quick thing I would add is those counties that have health care and retirement for their judges, we're state employees. That can be changed at any time by the counties. And in fact, the trend is to take health care away from judges, not to grant it. So I know that the judges in Wayne County, we have more judges in Wayne County than any other county, they were very concerned they were going to lose their health care just a year or two ago. their benefit was decreased, but they've still got something. But it could be eliminated at any time by the funding unit.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for, oh wait, I do some cars reading support, but you guys are good. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to the continued discussion.
Thank you.
We have Trevor Van Dyke from SCAO supporting the bill, not wishing to testify. Judge Mike Carpenter, president of the Michigan District Judges Association, supporting the bill, not wishing to speak. And seeing no absent members and nothing else pending before the committee, we are now going to be adjourned.